welcome to Wednesdays at Noon with Pumpkin Foods. I'm Shanique, and I'm your host on team here at Pumpkin Foods. Thank you so much to everyone who might join us today after we're live, or who might join us in and out today while we're live. I'm so happy today to have Loui Lord Nelson with us, who will talk to us about universal design for learning. And we'll learn exactly what that is in a second. Thank you so much, Loui, for being here.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It's a huge honor.
It's an honor for me as well. Before we get started, I actually just want to describe myself for those who may be blind or low vision and may be listening with us. I'm a Black woman who has her hair up in a bun today, wearing a terracotta colored blouse with glasses and earrings. And behind me, there's a sign that is white with rainbow writing, and it says Pumpkin Foods. It's on a gray wall in my home, and I am wearing a gold necklace, and I have like a little scrunchie around my bun today. And yeah, I think that's really all you can see in my vicinity of my screen right now. So, Loui, if you want to describe yourself, that would be great.
Sure, I am a white woman with very light skin. I have blondish brown hair that's, down a little bit low my ears. So short hair. I wear black glasses. And today I have on a pendant necklace, an Oxford style shirt that has kind of blue checks all over it. Some earrings you can barely see. Behind me is a gold lamp, but also hanging behind me is a version of the UDL framework, the guidelines. And over my left shoulder you can see the top of my desk, kind of the compartment part of it, but and a door. So that's pretty much everything that's in my screen.
Amazing. Thank you so much for describing yourself. Can you tell us more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am a former special education teacher who then went on to do my doctoral work in special education. And after that, I worked in the lifespan community, supporting people with disabilities. But then I learned about universal design for learning through reading Teaching Every Student in the Digital Age, which was one of the most popular books that CAST first put out about UDL. And soon after that was asked to lead efforts in a school district here in my state of Indiana. Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation asked me to come and be what we called at the time project director, but then soon renamed to UDL coordinator. As far as we know, they're the first district in the United States and then North America and then the world probably to say we want someone to really lead this because this is so important to us. And I worked across their buildings. Staff about that time was 750, somewhere around that, to help them learn about universal design for learning. And so after some years of that, then I won an opportunity to do my postdoctorate at CAST, who are the creators of Universal Design for Learning. And while there, I authored my first book, which is in its second edition now. So that's really exciting. And I have since just worked with educators around the world on their implementation of UDL. I do that through workshops. I do that through the books that I've authored, card game. I also I have like a life-size board game that we use.
How exciting is that? I can't wait for you to tell us about that, because when you told me that, I was like, wow, this is amazing, because talk about, accessibility. That takes accessibility to a new level. And what exactly is universal design for learning?
Yeah, so UDL is a collection of the best practices and research in areas of education, special education, educational psychology, and neurosciences. All of that information is organized into, and like I said, behind me is a kind of a copy of one format of the UDL guidelines. And if you think about the periodic table of elements, if anybody remembers that or they've been familiar with that, it's an organization of all the elements. Scientists, chemists use it. Very similar. So it's just organizing all this really good information in a way that helps us understand how the brain works,
Hmm.
while we're learning, and how we set up our learners so they can become expert learners. And so I'll stop there. But the framework is a way to help guide us, anybody who is helping somebody else learn something. It's a way to remind us, oh, I should weave these ideas into my instructional lesson and into my instructional milieu, into my environment, so that everyone has access and can participate and can show what they know.
That's amazing. And I know that you said you started in special education, but is there anything else specific that drew you to UDL, and why did you choose that area specifically?
Yeah. So when I read Teaching Every Student, I realized that this is actually something that I had been looking for. When I was doing my doctoral work, I was really fortunate to work with leaders in the positive behavior and interventions and supports, positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS. And that's about putting structures around students. So in the
Mm.
environment, lessons. And so everyone understands what they're supposed to be doing in that environment. And then you build that up by saying, you're doing this, yay, good job with participating in this. And so you have fewer issues with behaviors that are outside of the norms you want, right?
Right.
So I loved that very, very much. But I was like, academics, that was just, I was looking for something that really fit that mode for me. And when I read about UDL and learned, it was so exciting to understand how our brain functions when we're learning. And I mean, that just keeps growing, the information. So that's really what pulled me in, and it felt really accessible to me. It made sense to me, and it just kind of fit with my soul. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do something with this, and I don't know what it is. But then lo and behold, hey, I'm going to work with a school district. Yay!
That just made me feel so good inside. When you said it fit with your soul. I think that's so important to have more people in areas of life that feel like things, move with their soul and fit in their soul. So you can totally see that and feel that when you speak about UDL. When I first met you, I felt that. And I was so excited about today's conversation because of that. It sort of shines through when you speak about it. So it totally makes sense.
Thank you.
How can you tell us how can this approach be useful for the upcoming school year? I know it will look different for so many people, but how can that relate specifically to this upcoming fall season of school?
Yeah. So the framework can be applied again anywhere where learning is taking place. So whether that learning is taking place face to face or whether that learning is taking place in a digital environment, it's it's meant to help us understand how to have full engagement with our learners, but really how to help our learners understand how to find purpose and how to be motivated within this learning situation. So that's something that we need to, a skill. Those are skills we need to gain, right? It also helps us understand how to represent information. So often we can get stuck with representing things in maybe, one way or two ways, and we think, okay, I'm done. But rather anticipating and recognizing how diverse, how variable everybody is in our environment and going, I need to have multiple representations here available. And
Right.
and that's so that they can learn, of course, gain knowledge, but then also we want our learners to become resourceful. And so in our upcoming school year, depending on the platform, whether it's digital or whether it's face to face, we need to empower our learners so they know how to say, oh, I know I'm supposed to learn this.
Right.
I don't have this in front of me, so I need to ask for it, or I need to go ask a friend, or, and then the final part is helping our learners demonstrate, show what they know, and then they're also using their strategic thinking and learning how to plan things out and figure out how they're going to move towards that goal. And then also just how to be directed by that goal, understand, oh, this is it, and this is where I'm moving. So in this upcoming year, what I think about is there's a lot of confusion, right?
Yeah, for
We
sure.
don't, we're not going into 2 years ago where everybody just marched off to school on the first day, or even our digital learners, people who were already in digital environments. It's all higgledy-piggledy, right? And so when you have a framework and your learners know that they're going to have these different options and opportunities to help them uh, strategically, but also just move through this learning environment, they're going to feel a lot better about themselves and a lot better about learning.
Right. And this approach, does it apply to only a certain age, or can it be applied to sort of any demographic?
It is every age, every demographic. It's for all learners. And so, yes, we are understanding that. So, David Rose, one of the founders, there's a quick video of him. So, he's one of the founders of CAST, I should say. And he talks about variability, and disability is a part of variability, but variability is a much better word,
Mm,
because what we're thinking about is that all of us not only learn differently, just inherently, and I think people get that part.
yeah.
But what they don't necessarily understand is that we all learn differently in different contexts. And so, whereas I may learn, do really well with accessing information here at my own home desk and taking this all in. Let's say I need to go to a lecture hall
Mm,
and I'm going to be sitting and listening to a professor. I'm going to need some other supports so that I'm sure to take that information in, because it's not going to be in that environment likely, because I've got grades and all these
it's
other stressors down on me.
overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah, then I need some other supports. There is a myth is learning styles. Oh, I'm an auditory learner. Oh, and Howard Gardner out at Harvard helped us understand. He's the one who helped people understand about multiple intelligences. And what he helped us understand, though, is that we don't necessarily have this one thing, because one way of learning, this one style,
Mm,
is that ignores how our brain works. Our brain is so wonderfully interconnected, and we're using everything that's in there. And every person does this, barring a physical disability. And even with that, it's incredible what our brain does. And so, why would we ever, as human beings walking around and unable to open up somebody's head and look in, why would we ever assume that somebody learns a specific way? Instead of saying, we want to give you all the richness of learning and give you all these different opportunities so you can find your direction and you can take hold of your learning.
that's so fascinating. I'm sure that there are so many different pieces to this that we will not even get into today, but we will share more resources at the end of this where you can learn more about the UDL approach and read on your own time. But it's just so vast and so large, and there's so much to learn. But I know that, can you tell us about your book, Design and Deliver, Planning and Teaching using universal design for learning? Can you tell us about it?
Sure. So when I was exiting the job where I was the UDL coordinator and was just about to go to CAST, um, I was talking about UDL at a conference, and I was overheard by someone who said, "Hey, would you write a book about it?" And I thought, "Oh, I don't know. I've never done that before."
Way to put you on the spot. Wow.
But okay, I'll give this a shot. And what I realized was, at that time, there wasn't anything that broke down the framework in a way that made it accessible to teachers.
Mm,
And so what my book does is it speaks directly to teachers. And for someone who really wants to understand, like I gave the analogy of the periodic table, and like you
mhm.
get to know each element. Well, in universal design for learning, we have these organizing structures, and there's the principles, the three of those. There's these guidelines, 9 of those, and then underneath those guidelines there are checkpoints. Well, all of them are pretty broadly defined. And
Yeah.
so what I find is that teachers want examples of these things. They want to be able to envision them. And so that's what I did in my book. And since then, and in the second edition, I was able to add tons of stories, because I now host a podcast called UDL in 15 minutes. and wonderful educators from all over the world that are sharing their stories about what they're doing in their own learning environments with UDL. So if anybody's listening to this and you're like, okay, Loui, you're up here at 10,000 feet, still don't understand. It's okay. It's okay. You can just we'll talk about the podcast I know in a little bit, but
Yeah,
people can listen to that and hear educators, and you'll start to kind of put these pieces together, and that's the fun part. But yeah, so the book, it's really important to me that it's in a conversational tone, that there are lots of activities in there, that there are ways to understand this connection to technology that are in there. I call them bites, B-Y-T-E, a little pun, technology bites. And then I also just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable coming into this. And so it's my vision to kind of wrap people in the information, but in a way that they feel comfortable in that. And they feel
I
like,
love
okay, I
that.
can take some steps.
I love that. And I mean, on the same note, you, like we said, teach it in so many different ways. You have a couple of different mediums that you teach it in. I mean, you have a board game, a card game, coloring books. How did you decide to do it in this way? Can you tell us about that process?
Yeah, yeah, I will. So the coloring book came first, and that's because I was working with so many people where that wasn't my primary language. So working with people in Japan was kind of my first, wow, I really want to help them understand this
Yeah,
framework and how everything fits together. And then working with colleagues, even if English is spoken so differently because it's based on their own languages.
yeah,
And so I wanted to get past that language barrier. And so I used the analogy of a tree, which is a popular one, but sat with some of my really good friends in the UDL community and said, does this make sense to you? And talking through it. And then my dear friend, Allison Posey, who did illustrations for my first book, she works at CAST, very deeply knowledgeable about UDL. She acted as the illustrator for the comic book or for the coloring book. Um, and so that is really all about people helping them understand that the quote unquote theoretical side, which people kind of run away from theory. They're like, ew, yeah.
yeah.
And I was like, how can I make this, yeah, more engaging for people so that they need to understand this underlying stuff.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it feels like a bunch of strategies. UDL can feel that way. People look at it and they're like, well, I already do this stuff. I'm already doing these strategies and blah, 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 blah. Well, you got to understand this other stuff. And then the card game and then the board game, which is still life sized, so I don't have that like packaged at this point. But those came because when I'm doing professional learning, I'm always looking for opportunities for my learners to have
Mhm.
different ways to engage with the information. And so the Go Fishing with UDL definitely plays on the game of Go Fish, uh, but has the set of little rules and whatnot. And I do know that from teacher pre-service courses, I know the card game is used around the world. I can say that.
Yeah.
And I can also say that it's been pretty popular actually in pre-service teaching places and also, of course, schools. So again, it's a different way to engage with it and get your brain thinking about UDL and
Mhm.
work with others in a collaborative way. And the board game is helping everybody focus on those pieces of being the expert learner. And um, like in Candyland or any of those games where you land on the square and it says, "Whoops, you got to go back to the beginning," and you're like, "All I did was toss the die." Well, it happens in life, right? So and it happens in the classroom. So it happens in my board game. But also you pull cards that you answer a question, move forward so many spaces, and your goal is to get to the center, and that way everybody can celebrate together. And
I love that. It's very frustrating when you're told you have to start from the beginning, and that's, in any part of life. But I think it also teaches us about our sort of frustration tolerance. And Lisa will enjoy that I'm using that phrase because she likes it. Um, yeah, I think that sort of helps with that. So it sounds like a really fun game and a game that teaches you not only how people learn, but also about themselves, and people get to learn about themselves and what helps them in those situations. So, I mean, can you tell us how this relates to making universal design for learning more accessible? I know we
Yeah.
keep using this word access and accessible. How does that relate to that?
Yeah, so we do. And an interesting part here is that in the very, very beginning of UDL, it was designed with students with disabilities in mind. That was focus for CAST. They were looking for ways so that all students, including students with disabilities, were fully included in their learning environments. And then what they realized was, wait a second, all students benefit from these kind of strategies and this kind of thinking. And then that led them on their deep, deep quest of marrying those neuroscientific practices and education. Um, and so the word access is a key part of universal design for learning, which is fortunate and unfortunate at the same time, because there are people that unfortunately hear that and think, oh, well, that's a word from IDEA,
Mm,
Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But what we have to very quickly explain is that we all need that. It's like the welcome mat at your front door,
yes.
right? That's saying, come on in. Come on in. We want you to learn with us. And we are going to give you that welcoming so that you can be a part of this. And so when I'm thinking about different ways to talk about and introduce universal design for learning, that's what I'm trying to do, is give that welcome mat so they can come on in, start playing around with it, because just as you have observed, Shanique, it's deep. There's a lot in there, and you can come in from all sorts of different
Yes.
ways, which for some people that's intimidating. And so some people want me to say, you know what, start here, then go here, and then go here. Other people are like, set me loose, let me go, and I will find my way. And there is room for everybody and anybody in all of those thinking zones. So access is a key and important word, that we have to help everyone understand that everyone needs access.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, access also stems from like making room for people. I think that all of the ways in which you are teaching universal design for learning and making it more accessible to teachers and also to just learners around the world literally shows people that there is room for everyone wherever you fall in the universal design realm, the world. I mean, there's a whole thing, there's a whole world, a whole community that, like you've mentioned. But as you said, you can come in at different, areas, or you can come in at different levels. There's not a perfect way to do it, or, you know, and I guess we should move along, but who do you believe can best benefit from the approach for universal design for learning?
Oh my gosh, because it's not just a single group or person, it's everyone. So I'm going to sound like a broken record here. But there are learners who have traditionally not been served as well in classrooms.
Mm,
And so that does include students with disabilities, but it also includes students who live in poverty. It also includes students of color. These are groups who just by default in the way our structures have been. And universal design for learning can help open the way we instruct, and
mm,
that's why it's wonderful. There's a action going on within CAST right now where they are investigating the guidelines and looking at them through a lens of anti-racism, and looking at how they can um, strengthen the language within the framework to help people see this other additional part. And people can participate in that. All you
Interesting.
have to go is to go to cast.org, cast.org. It's right there on their homepage. Anyone can participate by providing comments and
Mm.
learning. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in this to go and investigate and read about that.
Okay, so cast.org, and we'll put that up somewhere on the screen. Yes, here we go. See, Lisa's on
Magic.
Magic. That's exactly what it is. And actually, we were talking before this about your experience internationally. Can you tell us about that? Does it change internationally when you teach it in different countries in the world? And where have you been? Can you tell us some of the places that you've been?
So all throughout, of course, the United States and up into Canada, Singapore, I've done quite a bit of work there extensively for the past 4 or 5 years. Australia, I have done work in Uganda. I've been doing work in Malawi. Might be doing some work in Cambodia. Just talked with folks last night. Done work dotted throughout Europe. So the question being, does it change where I am? Does the framework change based on where I am in the world? Here's what makes the framework shift. So 2 big things. One is that the framework was designed here in the United States,
Mhm.
pretty much using US-based research. And we are a highly individualistic nation and culture. And that really impacts how we think about things like autonomy. It impacts how we think about things like collaboration. It impacts things like how we determine success. And so when you take a framework that was designed in the United States and you take it to a culture that has different views on these areas. So for example, like in Singapore, because there's a very different look on things like autonomy and the individual versus the collective. That does change things. And for me as a practitioner, it was very important to, at the very, very beginning and since then, to have these very open conversations, because the interpretation of the information within the framework can be different. And so we have to keep talking and talking and talking. The second way that it's different is, for example, the work that I've been doing in Uganda has been in their very rural areas.
Mhm.
And these are areas that are low and no resourced is the terminology. So there's not electricity in the schools. They use blackboard and chalk, and students don't come with materials other than maybe they call them like they're like our blue books here in the United States, at the university level, little thing you can write in,
Mhm.
pen and pencil. And so how could we use the information that's in a framework that does have a tie into technology? That's where it started.
Mhm.
But there's tons that you can do because of understanding those underlying concepts, and that mindset that you can use from the framework. So my work when I'm working with those educators and helping them understand universal design for learning, it's just taking all of that into account and using what you got around you, right? And so, for example, when you look at a water bottle, and I don't have one right around here, but if you get up to the nozzle, there's a little bent part underneath that.
Yeah.
If you cut that out, you have now a little ellipsis. So you have like a lens, right? It's concave. If you put a little water in there, it becomes a magnifying glass. Well, when you're in an area where you're not going to have magnifying glasses around for science, looking at plants and looking at bugs or even looking at letters on the page, let's do that. So bringing forth these ideas and helping remind teachers that they can use these resources that are around them, tons of water bottles all over the place. You got some water because you got the pump outside. Let's use this. And how can we use this little thing? Because that engages the kids. It helps
That's so
them things
interesting.
better, and it might even help them express their knowledge. So taking ideas like that, right, and building on those. So those would be the two big things: is understanding the individual versus the collective, and then understanding the framework deeply enough that you can use it in an area where there are no resources. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it really humbles us. I think for me, listening to the way that you just spoke about that, it reminds me of all that I can be grateful for and the way that I was taught in school and how things differ throughout the world. I mean, that's amazing that I didn't even really realize that you can actually use water and a little sphere thing to make a magnifying glass. Like I just learned something. So that's amazing. And
Yeah.
small things like that, it sort of humbles you and allows you to feel gratitude in the moment. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And what is culturally responsive design? I saw that this was something that I discovered on your website and something that we spoke about. How is it different from universal design for learning?
Yeah, so my colleague Patty Ralabate and I decided to co-author a book, and we titled it Culturally Responsive Design for English Learners, the UDL Approach. We chose to kind of create the term culturally responsive design because UDL focuses on the design of your environment, the design
Mhm.
of your lessons. We wanted to bring that design thinking in. So the first part of the book spends time helping people understand culture responsive teaching. Um, and so on the backs of the greats like Geneva Gay and Gloria Ladson Billings and others who really have laid that groundwork for us and has since been picked up, and it's continued by them and then picked up by others. So we're humbled to be a part of that group. But helping educators see the connection between the two. That's our goal. And so within culturally responsive teaching, what you're doing is you're honoring what every student brings with them from their
Mhm.
cultures. We bring those things into our learning environments. So we honor that by providing opportunities for our learners to bring that with them, to utilize it, for us to recognize it in the learning environment by using those cultural norms and cultural examples within our lessons and within our environments, and in a way that it's celebratory so that everyone can see that we all bring these dynamics, and that's just what makes it all so fascinating when we are all together and learning together. So specifically, I use these seven definitions of characteristics from Brown University, and in the first part of the book, lay out specifically the connection between those characteristics and then universal design for learning. And then in the latter part of the book, we specifically dive into supports that you can provide to English learners and through the use of universal design for learning.
When I heard you speak about that, it just made me smile because it's literally taking inclusion to a new level. There's a lot of times where we experience, without realizing, that we're not fully accepted, specifically cultures and things that we bring into the classroom from our personal lives, be it, I mean, I don't, I can't come up with a specific example, but I love that that approach sort of brings the culture into the classroom and like you said, celebrates it. 'Cause that's so important because it's a part of who people like who we are and who how we learn and I think that that's amazing. That's really all I have to say, but it's so positive and like I said, it brings inclusion to a different level, something that we need to embrace more, I think.
Yeah, we learn. So the human brain learns based on what it already knows.
Mm,
Um, and so to ignore or not recognize what our learners already know
yeah.
and bring in with them, there's a beautiful term called funds of knowledge, and understanding, and the terminology is, funds like money. It's our knowledge that we bring from our cultural backgrounds is money. It's so valuable. And so as educators, if we can tap into those, then we're going to naturally engage our students more, see themselves in the environment, relate to something that's already going on, and then help them move to that next step, help them deepen their knowledge, deepen their experiences, and deepen their connection with learning.
I love that. And you've said so many amazing things through this conversation. I love that, Lisa, taking little pieces of what you're saying and putting them on the screen. So whoever will watch this after we're live, like we can keep all of these amazing quotes from you that we might even share on Twitter or something. Who knows? I'm going to find a way to use some of these quotes, but it's been amazing. What are you most looking forward to for this coming school year?
Oh my gosh. You know what the best thing is that I'm constantly meeting new people that are interested in learning about universal design for learning, which is going to sound totally UDL geeky, but it's but it's really true. And so I know that I'm going to meet educators, for example, in Wisconsin. I know I'm going to meet some in Vermont. I know I'm going to meet in other states and other locales that I'm already, scheduled to meet with them throughout the school year. And then again, internationally, and diving into and meeting people from other countries and other cultures, which just constantly taps into my brain, and it makes me need to learn more and think differently. And that's just going to keep it all rolling, which is really, really valuable. So that is what I look forward to the most.
That's amazing. And on the other end of the spectrum, is there anything that you are worried about?
Oh, I think what I'm concerned about is because UDL is significantly deep, it's not a quick fix. And it's unfortunate when I'm asked to come in for a 2-hour workshop. Hey, will you just introduce it? And then, boy, okay, because people really need to be in it. And so what I get concerned about is when people have been introduced to it in such a fast way, but there's no planned follow-up. There's no insight to understand how this needs to be woven in and over time, and give teachers the space they need. So not that I don't, it's not that I turn it down, but when I'm called for those kind of things, then I ask, so what else is going on in your school? What else are you doing? What's your strategic plan? Where does this fit? And how do you want it to keep growing? So anybody who calls me with that simple request, sometimes I think they regret it.
It's like a crash course. It's like giving someone a crash course and expecting for them to completely understand everything within like 5 minutes. So, I mean, I can imagine that. It can
Again, like the periodic table of elements, you would never ask a high school student to memorize the periodic table of elements and then begin doing experiments. So there's a lot of danger involved there, and it would just be misleading. It would be very, very inappropriate. So why would we expect our educators, who are highly trained individuals, to go into a framework that directly impacts how they are attending to their learners and just say, just go do. I don't think that's not fair to educators. So, yeah.
I agree with you. Just because we're almost out of time, I want the people to know about your podcast. Why did you decide on 15-minute episodes? I mean, we're back to the whole access conversation because I think 15-minute episodes are so convenient. Can you tell us about your podcast?
Yeah, so that was the biggest part about it. I really wanted it to be something that was accessible to people in their listening time. So I've had several people say, oh my gosh, that's when I fold my laundry. It's when I do my dishes. It's like this perfect snapshot. Other people go pick up their kids or what have you. But I wanted to make it so that the stories needed to be compact, and that we would just attend to that story. So 15 minutes kind of helps with that. In addition, with every podcast, I create a transcript. I create a video, a photo montage. So the teachers send me pictures, educators send me pictures, and I, through the magic of Adobe, put up on YouTube the photo montage with the podcast running underneath that. And then I also do an audio description of that photo montage. So anyone who has a visual need or they just want to have the pictures described to them, that's there. And then I also do a blog, so associated blog. So I take an idea from that podcast and expand on it. And it's all just like you've said, Shanique, it's all about making it the idea accessible and the information accessible. Yeah, it's
I
been
love
great.
it. I love it so much. I mean, it's a new level of convenience, and I highly recommend that if you're interested in UDL after hearing Loui speak about it today, go and check it out at this link right here on the screen that we'll also put in the comments so that it can be clickable for you, again, at your convenience. Before we go, I actually want to share with people your website and also where they can purchase your books and your card game, all on your website, but there are specific links for the books and the card game that is right here. Thank you so much, Lisa. We also can follow you on Twitter, where you are active talking about UDO and I guess whatever is on your mind, which is what Twitter is for. And I recommend that people go and follow Loui if you enjoyed this conversation. I sure did. Thank you so much for being here with us, Loui, and doing this with me and teaching me a new approach that I actually did not know anything about before now. And I look forward to hearing what else you do in the UDL community and beyond that. And I thank you so much for considering all of the different ways that you can make it accessible, because it's been amazing to see, you know, the way that you prioritize making this available to literally everyone. So thank you so much for this conversation and for teaching everyone about this today, whether they're watching live or if they watch after the fact. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Bye, everyone.
Bye.